Have you ever been on your way to the family Thanksgiving dinner when your spouse says, "Please don't ask my brother-in-law if he believes Jesus died for our sins or because of our sins"? Have you ever had second thoughts when preparing to put a Black Lives Matter or Vote Democrat sign in your yard about what the neighbors might think or say about it? If so, Joe Lichty, today's presenter, may give you some advice on what to do in these situations and how to do it well. Many of you know Joe well. He knows many of you. He spent his early years with Marge Lichty and was baptized here at College Mennonite Church. After graduating from Goshen College, Joe spent over 20 years in Ireland working for the Mennonite Board of Missions. He received his PhD in Irish history from the National University of Ireland in 1987. Joe taught peace, justice, and conflict studies at Goshen College from 2003 to 2020. In reviewing his CV, I found his 2010 paper titled "The National Anthem Debate at Goshen College" very interesting. I'm sure Joe and maybe others in the room who were involved in the national anthem issue learned a lot of what it means to be a Mennonite, an American, and a good neighbor. Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good morning, all. I thought I might know a few people. Hi, Mom, and turns out I just standing here can already identify more of you that I can't identify. So it's great to be what is home in real way. So polarization is a topic that has mattered to me for a long time, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with you today. Here's how I'm going to proceed. By way of introduction, is there anything I can do to get rid of the feedback?
Oh, yeah.
May turn your volume on your
I'm muted. Let me try turning volume down. Okay, that made it go away. Am I still being heard through the microphone? Okay, glorious. Okay, so I'm going to offer a simple definition and a perspective on why polarization is problematic. I'll move on to two main sections. First, the dispositions necessary to address polarization, and second, the necessary practices. So I'm not quite sure what to do with feedback, but I think it makes sense. Let me run through. Please hold your questions and we'll talk at the end, and I'll hang around as long as anybody wants to, and well, within certain reasonable limits. So here we go. So what is polarization? First thing to make it clear is what polarization is not. Polarization is not disagreement, it is not argument, it is not conflicting justice claims and beliefs about those justice claims. Those things are simply difference. Difference is with us always, and its many expressions can be opportunities for growth. Actually, there are probably our main opportunities for growth. So for my purposes today, I want to define polarization in terms of its characteristic dynamics. I propose that polarization is a process that starts in disgust, proceeds to contempt, generates rejection, and results in separation. What is being judged by way of this process is first an idea or a practice, perhaps, but crucially, the judgment extends to people and groups. This person is disgusting. I hold this group in contempt, and so on. Now, that is perhaps a little too linear. There are opportunities to disrupt and complicate this process at every stage. And yet I imagine that most of you have seen this, seen or experienced something like this process play out. And it can happen at lightning speed, especially when filtered through social media. When the process is in play, once the process is in play, it easily becomes cyclical and self-reinforcing. So the harms of polarization, the first one is simply to ourselves. Holding others in contempt diminishes our capacity for care and empathy. Our spirits are damaged. A second harm is to our relationships, especially potential relationships. We are driven to silos of the like-minded. In fact, we aren't so much driven as we willingly, eagerly run to our silos where we all agree that we're right, and we wonder how anyone could be as misguided and wrong-headed as the people in other silos. Another name for a silo, of course, is a community. And all kinds of blessings flow from our residing there and engaging there. In fact, we know that such communities are simply essential to human flourishing. Current research is demonstrating that community ties of various kinds, and not least the kind provided by church, are the most important antidote to the current epidemic of loneliness. The clear implication of these is that polarization damages our society. Contempt, mutual contempt, weakens the social fabric. And let me be dramatic. Polarization is the road to genocide. Not necessarily, of course. There are countless off-ramps on that road, but every road to genocide involves a route from contempt to social silos to dehumanizing our enemies, and usually to regarding our enemies as subhuman as animals. For evidence, see colonial conquests of indigenous people, see Nazi Germany, see pre-genocide Rwanda, see communist Cambodia, see Myanmar, and on and on and on. So if we want to get off the road to polarization, where are we going instead? Our desired destination could be named in all kinds of ways, but today I'm going to name our destination as generative dialogue. Not the catchiest, but it's significant. Got a handout here.
Yeah, it's that one. So
I'll take a moment to let this go around.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I brought 30. There's probably going to need to be a little sharing.
Oh. Got some extras.
Oh. Share. Let me share.
Extra too.
Oh, and I'm going to need one too. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. So I borrow this phrase from my friend, my close friend, the late Phil Thomas, as was channeled through my former student and now close friend, Jess Buller. Jess spent about 6 years as peace education officer or director or whatever for MCC US. And she created this 9-session Sunday school curriculum called Peaceful Practices. And I'll put in a plug now, I may put it in later, but if you want to go deep into this stuff, get this Peaceful Practices stuff. I taught it last fall at Berkey Avenue, 9 sessions for adults. I taught it this spring, 9 sessions for the MYF, and it's really high quality stuff. So I find this conversation matrix graphic helpful in a few ways. So you start out with down at the lower left corner, talking nice. This is how you deal with things. And there is a place for everything. Sometimes you really don't want to get into it and it's not the time to get into it, whatever, and talking nice will do. And then there's talking tough. I don't know, I suppose there's a place for talking tough, but it's usually to make myself feel better about myself. Nothing ever changes because of it, but maybe the issues need to be out there. There's a role for it. And then you go up to reflective dialogue, listening with empathy, suspending judgment. These are good things. They are essential things on the road to generative dialogue, to conversations that really matter. Because while I need to spend my time working hard at hearing you well, I also need to move on to make my contribution to the conversation. And I'll just read what it says about generative dialogue here. This is the kind of dialogue that offers potential for transformation. Both parties in the conversation are genuinely listening to one another while responding with their authentic and complete self. In fully engaging with one another, there is energy present in the dialogue, and new insights and growth can happen. You probably immediately think of conversations you've had like this. I'm going to close our time together with one I've been thinking about a lot this week as I teach at AMBS. This concerns conversation between the Indonesian Mennonite pastor Paulus Hartono and the local Hezbollah commander Yani Rusmanto. Do any of you know this story? Okay. Did I see just one? But it's a fantastic story, and I'm going to relate it a little bit at the end. Of course, you've spent time in Indonesia. Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. You probably know Paulus Hartono. Yeah. I'm envious. I've met him, but don't know him. So this is where where all this work is going. So I'm going to say something about these dispositions and practices. And I'll start with the dispositions. These are the mental, emotional, spiritual qualities necessary to address polarization. Because I believe this work always requires us to engage in self-examination, preferably to start there, to acknowledge our own complicity, to be open to, and to seek transformation. And even if I started with practices, I believe each and every practice reveals some aspect of the transformation required of us. And equally, starting with dispositions, I think each one will clearly imply practices, at least after the first disposition. So I'm going to address these by way of a few quotes, opening up just a few aspects of the work required of us. The work is not yours to complete, neither are you at liberty to give it up. Rabbi Tarfon, 2,000 years ago, from the Mishnah. I first encountered this quote in the mid-1990s, and the shock of recognition was so great that I think I actually laughed out loud. I was alone, and I laughed out loud. I'd been working in Northern Ireland since early in the politically hopeless 1980s, and this quote captured perfectly the disposition of the Irish colleagues whose work I had so come to admire. In the 1980s, every attempt at a political way forward was quickly shot down, but my colleagues persisted in the work that had inner integrity, work that pointed in the right direction, even as they knew that no clear path to peace could be traced with confidence. The work was theirs, but they knew the work was not theirs to complete. Neither were they at liberty to give up the work, and they persisted with grace and humility, and in hope, if not usually in optimism. So I believe that the challenge of polarization requires us to take that kind of stance. Polarization is a vicious manifestation of universal human dynamics. So while real progress can be made, there can be marvelous breakthroughs. Some version is always going to be a temptation, and addressing it will require a steady awareness, not a triumphant program aimed at a clear win. Okay, this is a really horrible quote most of the way through that ends beautifully, ends with a very important thing, and yet I think I need the whole quote. So here we go. The author, Daniel Silver, is writing an article about the like button on social media, and he's talking about the logic of the like, going deep into it philosophically. It's a pretty amazing article. On the model of the logic of the like, we may gravitate toward those who share our likes and away from those who do not, and delight in experiencing ourselves as fitted to one another, whether as allies or opponents. For John Dewey, and he's been working with Dewey, I got a whole new perspective on John Dewey that John Smith didn't give me, frankly, back in the 70s. So if interaction is to grow into participation, it only grows when there is a problem. Without facing the discomfort of encountering others who do not see what I see as beautiful, true, or good, there can be nothing meriting the term democracy. We may thus reverse the heterophobic dictum of the logic of the like from "who sees this as beautiful, let him join with me," to a Deweyan injunction, "who does not see this as beautiful, let me open myself to them." Who does not see this as beautiful, let me open myself to them. Opening myself to them means first curiosity, then relationships, based on exchange, of course, but for me, for us, for peacemakers, taking particular responsibility to listen. In conflict, there is probably some just ideal or good practice or constructive idea that you want to prevail. And so it should be. Never lose sight of the good you desire. At the same time, we need to remember that there may be a better outcome than we have anticipated, and it may arise through conflict, through learning from or with our enemies. Therefore, conduct the conflict in a way that lets you hear your enemies, which is to say, among other things, learn to listen well. I realized working in Ireland, I had this informal notion that it was a ratio of 7 to 1. Seven's a good biblical number. It might have been 12 to 1, 144 to 1. I don't know. But just put the emphasis on listening. And if you listen well, the chances are eventually the reciprocation will be some version of what do you think. Furthermore, very few people ever change because they are defeated in an argument and say, "What was I thinking? Of course you're right. I now believe what you believe." Pretty much doesn't happen. Still less do they change if they have been humiliated. How much of the grief and violence in this world arises from a sense of having been disrespected, humiliated? It's huge. People change because of relationships. I'm thinking of the story of the Ku Klux Klan Grand Dragon Larry Trapp and his relationship with Cantor Michael Weiser in Omaha in 1991. Trapp was sending threats to Weiser and his wife Julia and their family. He had just moved into Omaha. So what do you do when you're under threat? You insist on a relationship. Okay, right. Michael and Julia insisted on a relationship. Trapp ended up leaving the KKK, renouncing anti-Semitism, working against it. I think of the IRA in Northern Ireland and the West Belfast clergy group. The IRA had the good sense to realize that as the conflict went on, they were operating from stereotypes about what Protestants were and wanted and thought, and decided to set up a conversation. It was with some West Belfast Protestant clergy. It was difficult, but it was transformative. And a decade and more later, when the IRA moves against seeking their political goals by violence and moves to politics, it takes a long time to happen, and for good reason it takes a long time to happen, but it starts with this horribly difficult conversation between some West Belfast Protestant pastors and IRA leadership. People change because a cause, an idea, a practice is presented to them in a way they can hear. And this is impossible, returning to our text, unless we open ourselves to those who do not see as beautiful what we see as beautiful. Third disposition from the amazing Simone Weil. In the first legend of the Grail, she writes, "It is said that the Holy Grail, the miraculous vessel that satisfies all hunger by virtue of the consecrated host, belongs to the first comer who asks the guardian of the vessel, a king 3/4 paralyzed by the most painful wound, 'What are you going through?' The love of our neighbor," she says, "in all of its fullness simply means being able to say to him, 'What are you going through?'" So in our hunger, in our need, whether those needs are healthy or unhealthy, we focus on satisfying the hunger or need. We focus on what we are going through. And there is nothing necessarily wrong with that. But if we are to practice loving our neighbor, we need to learn to ask, what are you going through? So we're going to look at some conversation practices, but for now, just imagine how transformative that question can be. To turn from my needs, for the moment at least, to ask, what are you going through? This fourth disposition comes from Michael Gulker, a Mennonite pastor, president of the Colossian Forum. They have this wonderful Colossian way set of curricula on different topics. And this one comes from a video Michael did on loving enemies. This is from around 2018. And at a critical point, he asks, what sort of internal change would you need to make in order for you to desire your enemy's well-being? What one thing might you be able to do to demonstrate your care for this person, something they would receive as loving despite your sharp political differences? And note, something they would receive as loving, not what you know they need, but something they could genuinely receive as loving from you. So the first three dispositions have strongly implied that it's necessary for us to change, and here Michael makes it explicit. There are all kinds of things necessary to address polarization, some of which don't directly have to do with the disposition. It is necessary, for example, to know everything you can about polarization, to understand it from many angles. But I think it's important for us to be grounded in emphasizing our own participation in the problem of polarization. Here's a personal example. So sectarianism in Northern Ireland is polarization on steroids. Sectarianism is the term they use for when politics and religion combine to destructive effect. It is the dominant historical and no doubt not entirely undone problem in Northern Ireland. My colleague Cecilia Clegg and I worked in a project, 1994 to 2000, worked on a project. We were co-directors of a project called Moving Beyond Sectarianism. Part of that, we developed a definition of sectarianism. As we worked with groups, we expanded it in various ways. And yeah, okay, so I won't put these elements of the definition up. But we included sectarianism happens because hardening of boundaries between groups, overlooking others, belittling, dehumanizing, or demonizing others, justifying or collaborating in the domination of others, physically or verbally intimidating or attacking others, Now, 4 out of 5, I am innocent as pie. The other one, I am struck down, and that is overlooking others. As we developed this, I realized a thing I can do, we're in conflict. It gets to the point where I don't want to deal with this anymore. And I can just kind of shut down the relationship. It's as if you aren't there anymore. Now, again, this is a great way of doing it because I still look innocent as pie, don't I? I mean, I haven't done anything. It's what I'm not doing. And yet I am this overlooking deeply contributes to the problem of sectarianism. So I'm just making the point that the essential nature of figuring out our own participation. For me in this culture, the equivalent responsibility is my failure to leave my silo enough, which is a matter of spiritual lethargy leading to inaction and endless excuses. You can figure out your own particular participation in the problem of polarization. So this is something I taught quite a bit at first at undergraduate, then at graduate level in Northern Ireland, but I'd never worked until I came to Goshen in 2003 with a 4-year cycle with 18 to 22-year-olds especially. And something I found it necessary to say to them from time to time was, do you need to say something or do you need to be heard? Because if you need to say something, doesn't matter how you say it. Just blast off there. Now you said it, your need has been met. But if you need to be heard, that requires the most careful attention to how you are going to say what you need to say. It requires the practice of listening well. It requires the skill of being able to play back what you've heard, to play it back with intellectual accuracy and equally with emotional accuracy. I got a classic Northern Ireland story here. Cecilia and I were working with a group of working class Catholic and Protestant women in Derry in the northwest corner of Northern Ireland. And it was a good group in so many ways, but also difficult. Everything, we were pretty experienced at this point, and everything was taken twice or 3 times as long with this group. So we get to a point where we're going to address some issues. The issue is the police. The police could not be a more divisive issue in the Northern Ireland of that time. To Catholics, the police pretty much are the problem. They are the agent and practitioner and cause of sectarianism. I mean, they are the problem. To Protestants, they are all that stands between us and complete chaos as a society. So just totally untouching viewpoints on the police. So we've invited a guy to talk about the police, and I don't remember how this came out, but he was pretty far on the Catholic nationalist Republican end of the spectrum. He worked for an organization that looked into police violations and legal violations of Catholic rights. And you know, the way these things go is if you're my enemy and you're looking in and people are doing things to my community and you are protecting them, probably they are really guilty and therefore you are protecting the guilty. So this was kind of explosive to invite this guy. We did. So here's how he started out. He said, let me say a word about what the police mean to the Protestant community. And he spent about 5 minutes talking about that. And he did it so well. He had heard so well. He had captured so well a viewpoint that he really in no way shared, that when he played it back, the Protestant women in the group said, yeah, that's it. You got it exactly. The group changed. A switch flipped. Things simply worked better from there on. So turning to practices, questions of curiosity. This is something, well, it's something I learned with no intention through working with Cecilia on this Moving Beyond Sectarianism project. So we were invited to talk to groups. So we're always working with people who have invited us to hear, but that doesn't mean there's not an element of suspicion, and especially because we're outsiders in our different ways. Me, so obviously, as an American Mennonite living in Dublin, Cecilia, a little less, as a Scottish Catholic nun living in Belfast, but still an outsider. Opening up work with groups, people were understandably a little tense, and it was not uncommon to receive some terse initial statement made with tight lips, arms crossed, closed posture, maybe a fairly overt touch of anger or suspicion. A thing I learned was that to walk forward and say to the person, well, say more about that. And I had to know more about that. I exist solely by figuring out what's going on. I have to know more. Well, when I do that, I discovered it was something like a magic formula. Invariably, as I remember it, people would relax, they would unclench, and they would elaborate in a constructive manner, perhaps in great pain, but nonetheless constructively. So curiosity can go a long way. More recently, especially from about 2012 to 2022, I was working with this Colossian Forum in different capacities, and they articulate questions of curiosity in a careful, helpful way. Here's how they put it together. The idea behind, well, let me read them. So here are some things you might ask in a difficult conversation. Why is this important to you? What's at the heart of your concern? How did you come to be concerned about this? Are there particular experiences that led you to this? How do the views of your friends and family compare with yours? Do you have any mixed feelings about it? The idea behind questions of curiosity is to move away from trying to avoid a difficult conversation or to somehow win the conversation, or even to start your reply by articulating your own position, however well, however peaceably you do it, and instead to demonstrate curiosity. And when you demonstrate curiosity, you demonstrate care, which is to ground the conversation in a new way. And another handout here. In the 21 to 22 academic year, I worked for Colossian Forum with Calvin University profs and employees on polarization issues. One woman, a prof named Penny Lynn Dijkstra Pruim, a wonderful Calvinist Dutch name, shared a similar scheme that she had been developing with others, basically an extension of the questions of curiosity approach. And again, I will need a copy.
Want to give a speaker? Oh, sure. Oh.
So what the Colossian Forum questions of curiosity largely were responses. But this group had developed some other things, prompts, entry moves. Okay, so these also are additional skills we can learn to try to make conversations that we might be tempted to shut down, conversations that could be explosive, how to try to make them productive, even transformative. Last fall, I taught this peaceful practices curriculum at Berkeley Avenue. I introduced this document from Calvin. And one class member, Amy Kratzer, responded by saying, you also need to name possible closure clauses for when a conversation is going nowhere but down. Here's what she proposed and the group heartily adopted. Thanks for what you shared. Now I need time to process our conversation. When would be a good time to talk more about this? And if it is someone you interact with often, it might be appropriate to decide on a code phrase or word that one uses if they're feeling triggered and need a hard stop to the conversation. Both parties agree not to persist if the other uses this word or phrase and to come back to that conversation, if necessary, at a later time. Some people use end scene, break time, whatever it might be. Now, note that none of these are full closure statements. Entirely in keeping with Amy's spirit, they are let's come back to this later statements. Another Colossian forum device. And this is, as I remember using it in Colossian Way curricula, it is about how to receive anger. It is equally valuable for how to reflect on my own anger. And so it is, in hard conversations, you sometimes get hit with a blast. You get hit with definitive take it or leave it statements. It's so easy to shut down or fire back, fight or flight. The idea behind this is to think differently and to ask yourself and to inquire about, okay, you're angry. What's behind the anger? And often behind the anger is some fear of something that's going to be lost. And the reason for the fear is that there's a love there. There's something people really value, something that is so important to them. If you can turn the conversation from clashing angers or simply focusing on the anger and get down to the fear, get down to the love, more is possible. There's even the possibility of sharing something about that love. You may share a version of that love with this person who has expressed this viewpoint that is so angry, so hard for you. Now, I find this helpful for also thinking about my anger when I encounter things. And I routinely read things that just make me so angry. I want to pick up the book and throw it across the room and swear a lot. And mostly I don't. But I really get angry. And when I ask myself, why am I responding so bitterly to this idea, practice, whatever it is? Well, if I look, there's a fear. And behind the fear is that this is a threat to something I love. So it's very useful to me in thinking about myself as well. So practices for the final practices, the final slide, get out of our silos and engage with those we fear or hold in contempt. Everything we've talked about is empty theory and sterile practice if we do not get out of our silos and engage with those we fear or hold in contempt. So this is where I'm going to tell you the Yanni Rusmanto Paulus Hartono story. I'm currently teaching my last class at AMBS before retiring. It's Religion, Violence, and Peace, which, especially if you swap out peace and replace it with reconciliation, are basically the themes I've been working on for the last 45 years. So this is a great way to finish. I'm having a wonderful time. On Thursday, we focused on the story of Indonesian Mennonite pastor Paulus Hartono and Hezbollah commander Yanni Rusmanto. I know of 3 sources. You may know of some others, and I would love for you to tell me if you know more. But one, 2007, Alan Ep Weaver and Peter Dula edited a book called Borders and Bridges, which was a collection of stories of interfaith engagement that MCC had encountered around the world in fairly recent times. Then Hartono and a journalist whose name I'm not remembering right now, journalist and theologian whose name I'm not remembering, came out with a book about this, which is translated into English. It's really hard to get hold of, but that's an important source. And then most recently, Jonathan Bornman from Elkhart County, he worked for quite a few, he was a missionary in Senegal with Eastern Mennonite missions. He worked with for at least 20 years, possibly longer. EMM has had a Muslim-Christian dialogue team, which has done really interesting work. He was part of that. And then also somewhere along the line, he picked up a PhD in anthropology. And just this past year, he came out with this documentary called Unexpected Peace. Starts with the Amish at nickel mines. He starts with his home community in Elkhart County, then goes to nickel mines, then to a Sufi pacifist Muslim community in New York City. But the bulk of it is the Hartono and Rusmanto story. So here's how this originates. Early 2000s, early 2000s, there are a bunch of radio licenses are being made available by the Indonesian government. There you have to apply for licenses. Local Hezbollah was applying for one. Local evangelicals were applying for one. And there got to be contention about overlapping bandwidths, et cetera. And the Hezbollah response was threatening to blow things up, as they regularly did, including blowing up churches and so forth. And Hartono got invited in to be a mediator in this. He mediated successfully. So we had the evangelical station, we had the Hezbollah station, and all was well. But he doesn't leave it there. Hartono decides, oh, this would be a good opportunity to get to know the main guy I've been working with on this problem, Yanni Rismanto, the Hezbollah leader. So he goes to the Hezbollah headquarters and asks to see Rismanto. Rismanto has no interest. He says, go away. Somebody else tell him to go away. And so here's where I start to be judged, because I might have had the courage and the sense to say, here's an opportunity, why don't I take advantage of it? I might have gone to request that first meeting. And when I'm told no, hey, it's very important to me to be innocent as pie. I'm innocent as pie, and I tried. It's not on me anymore. Goodbye, the end, okay? And it would have been fine if Hartono had done the same. But he doesn't. He goes back, rejected. He goes back, rejected. He goes back, rejected. Eventually, Rismanto gets tired of this and decides to have the conversation. He is harsh and cold to Hartono, and they talk. It goes nowhere. And he says, Rismanto says, look, you're an infidel. You're an infidel pastor, and you're ethnic Chinese. These are all legitimate reasons for me to kill you. Now, at this point, I am not so much leaving as fleeing 100 miles per hour, but Hartono's response is, okay, I'm an infidel. That doesn't mean we can't talk, okay? Oh, they talk. And over time, relationships form and practical things happen. Indonesia is the site of, it's near a volcanic ring. It's at the intersection of three tectonic plates. It's, set up for endless natural disasters, and they have them. So a case of a tsunami, massive tsunami, the local Mennonites have a service group that they want to send to work with a victim site. And this Rismanto has skills in radio technology. They need to set up a whole bunch of radios for people who've lost everything in this area. So Rismanto, they invite him and he comes along. This means they are speaking to each other. They're living in the same place. So as Rismanto and I think some colleagues, some Hezbollah colleagues of his are living in the same place as the Mennonite volunteers. They're eating together. By happenstance, a group of North American Mennonites has come through to observe MCC peace work, Indonesian peace work. And Rismanto gets invited to speak to the Mennonite group and the Mennonite international people. He talks and he breaks down crying and he can't go on. And it's not clear why, but Hartono is talking to him later. And he says, I've been involved in military actions in these different settings where I've been part of killing quite a few Christians. And if I knew then what I knew now, I wouldn't do that. And he talked about the way this conflict, this violence has damaged our souls, is continuing to damage our souls. You know, part of working on these themes is you get to encounter, amidst all the suffering and the destructiveness, what I regard as high points of human history, unique points in human history. Has there ever been a Hezbollah commander who broke down in tears in front of a group of Christians who are listening to him? I don't think so. How is this possible? It is possible because of Paulus Hartono and his crazy insistence. And it's expanded and expanded and expanded. So the hometown where Rismonto and Hartono live, Solo, is apparently, I'm saying stuff that I half know. You're going to correct me if I'm wrong, okay? But apparently it's a powder keg. The dynamics are such that when there is potential for conflict, the potential is realized in Solo. And yet it has become a much more peaceful place. It doesn't come down to solely this ongoing relationship between Rismonto and Hartono, but it started there. And just the most amazing things have happened. And this is because Paulus Hartono would not stay in his silo and insisted on relationship. There are all kinds of things that are necessary for peace and lead to peace. This is frankly the most fascinating to me, and I think I can safely say that it truly is essential. So let me leave it there.
All right. We have a few minutes, and Joe, you said you would stay
Yeah, sure.
afterwards if you want to come up to. Are there any questions you want to ask now? We must all
Yeah.
be taught. Yeah. If none, thank you, Joe, for speaking to us.
My pleasure, a great pleasure. Well, I will say this Unexpected Peace documentary, Google it and you can view it in any number of ways. You can get it for a group. One thing you can do, that one model is get it for personal use and pay what you think you want. Okay, so it's quite wonderful documentary. It's not, you need more sources on Hartono, but you can get it. Unexpected Peace.